Morning, guys. Happy Friday. Hope you're off to a good one so far. We're visiting my in-laws, my husband's family. We have some family affairs to take care of this weekend. And I always like doing our lives from this room because I have an audience. I've shown you before. So I feel like I'm talking to people and that they're listening, other than you, of course, which I adore. I appreciate. It's a little difficult to be in a new atmosphere though for the kids, and they always do not sleep. So I'm drinking some tea this morning, but I have a feeling I could use something stronger, which then made me think, well, maybe once a week we should do mimosa moments instead of coffee talk. But I know some of you actually have to drive to work or drive kids to school, and that probably would not be safe or effective. But maybe we should think about doing it once a month, mimosa moments in the evening, and having like a little chat about news. So let me know what you think about that. It's been kind of an interesting 24 hours. So here's a couple things I think you should know before you head into your weekend and get on with your lives. Number one is that it does look like this is going to be the longest government shutdown in American history. Why is that? Because roughly end of the day Friday, early Saturday morning, we'll be in that territory where the shutdown has lasted longer than 21 days. You're hearing the president, especially after visiting the border, talk more about declaring a national emergency. But remember our card from earlier this week that a president just can't declare a national emergency without any law backing up his reason for it. So just know if you saw a headline cross unexpectedly that the president is declaring a national emergency, know that he has to point to an existing law that says this is the reason why I'm declaring a national emergency, and likely his counsel, his lawyers feel strong that he would be able to survive a challenge on that of using the money to fund the border wall and fund border security without going through Congress. There are many that don't think this is a good idea because it sets a precedent. We know that border security is a national security issue. Whether or not it's an emergency is a bigger debate. And so not legislating through that problem and using Congress and going that way, because remember, Congress, the House of Representatives, controls the purse, controls our money, controls how it's used, sets a precedent that may not be good for government. This is an issue that could look political, whereas declaring a national emergency after a hurricane does not. And if it sets a precedent where Democrats could then use a national emergency declaration for something else that appears political to some and emergency to others. Some are using an example of like climate change, which I don't know if is a great example. I think there are conservatives that believe in climate change too, but that's just an example of, well, some believe that's a national emergency, and could a president come in and declare, make a national emergency declaration for that? So just keep that in mind if you see that. There were some reports floating around. I thought it was worthwhile to flag. The Washington Post was one of them that said that the Army Corps of Engineers, who gets a certain amount of money for emergency disasters, had like $14 billion left over of disaster relief money that was never used. And so that the White House was thinking, well, that's something that we could point to say, hey, look, we have the money. We'll use that. So we're not using new appropriated money. We're not using new taxpayer money. So let's just see where it goes. Right now, it doesn't look like there's a huge solution that's happening in Congress. So that's something I think you should know. Second thing I think you should know is that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo delivered that speech that we talked about in Cairo yesterday, mapping out what does he think about the Middle East and American policy in the Middle East. He did it in the same site the same city that President Obama gave his very important speech at the beginning of his administration. And Secretary Pompeo really took on the Obama administration's philosophy in the Middle East. I put a link to this speech on our website. I think it's worth a read. It's a longer speech than, some of the speeches that you might get on a regular basis, but I think it's worth it. He maps out a very clear vision for how he sees the Middle East. He says that America has always been liberating force in areas, never been occupiers, and will continue to be good partners, especially when it comes to terrorism. What's really fascinating about this, remember, you can't just think about this trip, and he's on this tour of 9 different countries in the Middle East. Ambassador Bolton, our national security advisor, was also in the Middle East just at the beginning of the week. Secretary of State Pompeo is there throughout the week. And then suddenly overnight, we got an announcement from the military that despite both of their assertions that the U.S. military was going to be staying in Syria and staying in the Middle East to continue to fight terrorism to the end, that there is the start of withdrawals of troops from Syria. Now, what does that look like? I have no idea, and the military won't speak about it. So are we talking about withdrawing, 100 support staff from Syria? Are we talking about withdrawing 1,500 of the 2,000 troops there? We have no idea. So is this a way for the administration to say, well, we are doing what the president said, but we also are keeping a presence in Syria? I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. Is this a way that even though Secretary Pompeo and the National Security Advisor talk about staying in the Middle East, it's a reminder to our allies that we can make our own independent decisions? I don't know what the message is. I think it's an interesting one to look at. So that also is happening today. So then 2 fun stories I just want you to know. The Consumer Electronics Show is in Las Vegas. This is always a really great time. It's a huge conference where you see all the new technology that's coming down the pipe. And just as a reminder, a couple of months ago, I told you guys I bought an oven, and I thought we learned some interesting things about prices. There was some, concern about Chinese tariffs and how that's going to raise prices for our appliances. Thank you so much. Is that the phone? No, it's the remote control. She wants to watch a movie, of course. But one of the guys that was selling me the appliance said, hey, do you want an oven that links to your phone so you can turn on your oven from your phone? And I was like, why would I ever want to do that? That sounds so dangerous. Plus my kids grab my phone. Can you imagine they're turning the oven on while I'm out of state? I mean, come on. It just sounds bad. But now the real trend are all these linked devices and voice-activated devices. So 2 that I thought were awesome, although I think very dangerous, is an oven that is linked to your calendar that then can refer to you recipes that you have time to cook. So suggestions, or a refrigerator that has an app. So when you're in the grocery store, you can be like, do I really need milk? And then you can check your app and the refrigerator will tell you. But here's the catch. All of your linked devices are collecting data. Not only just like the Alexa devices that you talk to. So imagine that an insurance company, this is an example that was given by the Associated Press, an insurance company buys the information about your refrigerator and then insures you at a different rate because they can tell that you buy ice cream. It's a dangerous new world. So they're like, oh yeah, you say you're healthy, but your refrigerator has bacon and ice cream in it, so you get docked. I know. I was like, whoa, that's so crazy. But I think just save this recording because I'm going to look like an old woman in like 5 years when we all have that device. So isn't that so insane? I know. Okay, then the final thing today, guys. Today is the day that Amelia Earhart made a really historic trip. Not the trip where she unfortunately was lost at sea or believed to be, but the trip where she flew from Hawaii to California. And what's remarkable about this trip is that she was the first person to ever do this. She was the first woman to solo cross the Atlantic, but this was the first time anyone had flown from Hawaii to California. It's a longer trip than the Atlantic crossing. She's the first person to ever do it, man or woman. And it's really kind of a dangerous trip because you have a lot more time over water than land. So I just thought that was so interesting to learn a little bit more about her. Also, I had no idea that around this time, about 2 years before she made this journey, she developed a fashion line for other women aviators, but more for women travelers, because she knew that flight was going to change the way that women existed. That women, just like men, were going to be able to travel, and they needed wrinkle-free clothing. So she developed a line of wrinkle-free clothing, even some clothing using like parachute material and other cool stuff, because she thought that women are going to need it, and she needed it. Very cool. Amelia Earhart, she's just like us. She's a modern woman, So cool on Amelia Earhart. That happened today. She took off from Hawaii, and just like an image for you, it was raining, and like all of these emergency personnel and like the audience were watching her thinking she's never going to make it. She's never going to take off. And then boom, she did. Just cool. Have a great weekend, you guys. Keep your questions coming on the news. A lot to watch, but just remember, we're going to be okay. Have a great day.